Good morning and welcome to Brewing Happiness. So glad you're here to join me today on Wednesday, Hump Day. I thought we'd do something a little bit different. Well, not that different, but lighter, right? We've been talking about so many heavy subjects. So a couple weeks ago, I talked about water. Today, I thought we would talk about fire. Fire and the history of fire and the meaning of fire in our lives. So glad you joined me today. If you're here on the replay or the live, it doesn't matter. Drop me a note and let me know you're watching. Let me know what you think about silly topics like fire and if they make sense to you. But I'd love it if you'd leave me a note. Now, we know that all animals have a great respect for or kind of fear of awareness of fire. Some birds, even hawks, even use it to like identify prey, right? They're flying up there and they see animals running away from fire and they use that. But only humans have learned to control it. Only humans have brought fire into their home and made it a tool. So, what about fire? We are mesmerized by the fire, right? The flames. Don't you love to just stare into the flames as they flicker and rise? And maybe it's because they change and come alive, but whatever it is, we kind of keep staring, right? We like to, I don't know about you, I like to poke a stick in there and get some embers to fly up, but we're just fascinated by fire. We don't know why. And but we know that it's true. The candle industry, $2 billion a year in candles because we like to have a little flame up. I probably should have lit one this morning. We like to have a little flame burning near us. So for generations, fire rituals, right? We've had fire rituals based on ceremonies. In Hindu, they have a fire ceremony called a yajna, which translates to sacrifice, devotion, worship, and offering. And then yajna has come to be performed in front of a sacred fire and kind of any sacrifice or any ritual that includes a fire. And many other cultures have many other rituals that include fires. Now, some theories are that our basic fascination wanes once we learn to control our fire, right? They've actually done studies. Why do we love the fire? Why do we stare at the fire? And they found out that humans are not universally drawn to fire, right? It is not something hardwired in our brains to love to stare at the flames or to be fascinated by the flames. And the conclusion is the fascination is a consequence of inadequate experience with fire during development. Now, in cultures so today in our society, we don't use fire every day, right? You turn on the stove, but you're not hitting the flint. You're not making a fire. You're not dependent on an open hearth for warmth or for cooking or for protecting you from the wild, right? Like we used to, like it was at one time. And so we are separated from fire these days. We don't live it. It's not part of our daily lives. And since we are not handling it and learning to master it, that's apparently when we stop being fascinated by it. When we understand it, when we can control it, when it's just a tool for us, then it stops being a big deal. And we don't have that in our modern lives today because we're not touching it every day. So we, modern people, still fascinated by the flames. In societies where it's used daily, they find people lose their interest in fire about 7 years old. Once they understand it, they don't touch it, they understand how to handle it and what to do with it. Done. You're done being fascinated. Darwin, you remember him, Charles Darwin. He thought fire was the greatest discovery made by man, except for language. But honestly, fire, while you think it was only important to early humans, it has been important to technology, to the development of things like the combustion engine, ceramics, metalworking. Even the nuclear industry all starts with our ability to create and control fire. Now, here's how it started. So, a long time ago, and recently, scientists, we thought fire started around 400,000 years ago. We started using fires as a people. But new archaeological evidence in the last 50 years is leading us to believe that fire and the use of fire has been around for like a million point one point, as much as one. Good morning, Joanne. That fire, the use of fire has been around over 1 million years, maybe almost as much as 2 million years. Early humans were using fire. See, in the beginning, early men just saw fire, right? We just kind of became aware of fire. It was everywhere. Lightning strikes. You got the whole empty world, right? Lightning striking all around, striking the bush, fire, bush burns into fire. So, earliest man says, oh, we can observe fire. And so what happened is, since we started observing fire and understanding it, we started doing a better job of foraging food, right? We saw that it was used, we saw that fire could be used to do better foraging, to and then we actually started using domestication for fire for cooking. And it seems that we humans, we human peoples, we used fire long before we knew how to start it. We learned how to manage it, right? You go for the fire, the lightning comes, the bush burns, take the fire, and you manage it. And they learned that dung, animal dung, would keep the fire burning, so we had to learn. But it was simple. We learned that when there was a fire around, you could do things like retrieve bird eggs or catch small rodents and lizards and other small animals. And then we learned the fire to cook. Maybe we found some burned up animals and ate them and said, oh, not so bad. Let's do this ourselves. And then we found that cooking made the food easier to eat, easier to digest. Well, as we began to use it, right, they also learned that maybe they saw fire. It helped in hunting, is you could position yourself in front of a fire as the animals come out of the forest fleeing from it, right? So as we're learning to control fire, it was then that becomes part of, we're learning to control fire. Now it requires ongoing management. I can't make it, but I can find it and I can keep it. But that requires tending and constant attention. So now we're starting to see the development of duties, right? Separation of responsibilities. This is the beginning of society. So fire played a part in the beginning of societies. And we learned, like I said, to preserve food. Maybe they learned to, I don't know, smoke it. But using fire helped societies that were dependent on seasonal foods, right, to eat year round. We started cooking about 1.8 to 2.3 million years ago. We started, like, again, we don't know how to start it yet, but we know how to use it, and we're cooking. And we started cooking, so we got better nutrition, bigger brains, right? Then we started making pitch, which is used in hafting. Isn't this fun? Hafting is the art of attaching a stick to a stone tool. So maybe it's like my little finger, my little hand. Maybe it's putting an arrow on the end of a stick. Maybe it's putting a sharp stone for chopping or hatcheting. All I know is this fixing the stone to the pointy sticks, it required kinds of glue and pitch, and these things all require sustained fire. So what we're finding is the history of fire is way longer than we originally thought, right? In more and more ancient archaeological digs, we're finding charcoal, fragments of burnt bone, burnt grass. But the truth is, in spite of finding this new evidence, in spite of there starting to be more and more evidence of fires earlier and earlier, the evidence is thin. The number of sites that have fire evidence is thin, and it's not consistent. Some older societies had fire, then we go with periods with no evidence of fire, then we use fire again. So it's spotty. And the truth is, anthropologists agree that we don't know the actual history of how we learned to make fire. We don't know actually disparate societies and when each picked up the fire, the fire habit, right? Some major sites lacking any fire evidence at all. Significant gaps in our understanding the domestication of fire, the use of fire. But there is one thing we agree around. We agree that there was a significant improvement around 400,000 years ago. Now, originally, before the new evidence of the older sites started popping up, anthropologists thought that's when we kind of discovered fire, started using it as a human. But as it turns out, no. We've been using it for 1.5 million years before then. But around 400,000 years ago, fire evidence becomes plentiful. It's everywhere. We start looking for the hearths, right? Looking for the open fires at the opening of the cave or around the whatever shelter that they were using. It becomes plentiful from this point in time. And again, we still can't deny it. Now, one of my favorite movies, I'm going to recommend a movie if this is an interesting topic for you, is Quest for Fire. Now, I personally love a movie where there's a lot of nonverbal communication. And this movie is about cavemen, Neanderthals specifically. So a lot of grunting, but not much language. So again, I love this movie. And it's about a group of peoples, Neanderthals, and they have a little bit of fire. And they're carrying it. Now, this is the time of, the end of the Ice Age. This is Europe. The big plains are very cold, very bleak. And fire is necessary for sustenance of life, right? So the movie is about their fire goes out and the people are doomed. They know they're not going to survive the winter without a fire. So because they can't make it, they have to go look for it. Quest for fire. Now, I don't want to give any, what do they call it? I can't think. I have a senior moment. I don't want to give away the end of the movie. But in the movie, the Neanderthals, like it says, can just manage fire. And in the end, a humanoid, Homo sapien type person teaches them to make fire. So in first, all the anthropologists were like, this movie's old, right? This movie's been around for 30 years. And originally, all the anthropologists were like, wrong. That's not how it happened. And yet new evidence says maybe it did. The Neanderthals maybe didn't learn how to make fire, but they did learn how to master it. Anyway, the date's unclear. The date is unclear. Earlier people have fires, then later folks don't have fires. But 40,000 BC, fire, 400,000, about 400,000 years ago, fire is a part of daily life. They had to maintain the burn, right? Again, couldn't start it. They had to maintain the burn. That was reliant on a strong social network because everything was about keeping the fire alive. But so again, there's no clear evidence of when we learned to make fire. We can suppose it was around the 400,000 year mark because that's when fires started being prevalent in all societies. But again, just a guess. And it seems like it happened in stages. We learned how to make fire. There wasn't one like magic moment and all of a sudden the whole world knew how to make a fire. It was more in stages. And these stages lasted hundreds of years. So this was a very long process over time. In any case, fire helped us to cook. Cooking food gave us access to eat foods that maybe were uneatable at raw, right? As well as preserve a little bit of food. So now we're eating better. And what happens? Your brain starts to grow, right? So now we got bigger brains. Again, this is over the passage of thousands of years. This isn't happening in a day. Our brains are getting bigger. We're getting smarter. And so because we're getting smarter, we're figuring out how to use fire to help us advance technologically. Ta-da! Fire is part of our history and our culture, no matter who you are, no matter where you live. Fire is part of it. It's been used in culture, right, to symbolize passion, desire, rebirth, resurrection, eternity, destruction, hope, hell, and purification. So fire is used a lot of earliest literature. Humans were writing about fire. In the very, very earliest literature recorded, we're writing about fire. or its ability to nourish us, protect us, harm us, even kill us, right? We understood back then, double-edged sword. In fact, that one of the theories is why some sites are found without fire evidence is that some cultures or societies may have just decided that the risk was too great, that the rewards of the fire weren't worth the risks. Maybe there were some really bad fires that broke out and, people were like, warning, warning, fire can be bad. I don't know. But we do know about its risks and rewards. And speaking of that, fire symbolization has kind of a duality to it, right? It denotes both destruction and rebirth, right? It's kind of on both sides of the coin there. So, like a lot of myths around fire. Prometheus, one of the earliest myths, right? Steals the fire from Zeus. Man had fire, Zeus takes it away. He doesn't want man to be too popular. Prometheus steals it from Zeus and gives it back to the people. One of our earliest fire stories, right? In Polynesian figures, they have a similar story of stealing the fire from the gods. And then there's Loki, back to our good friend Loki, the Norse god, the trickster god, right? Excuse me. He stole fire. And its fire is kind of associated with these trickster devil gods, right? The ones that necessarily weren't interested in what was best for humanity. And some think that because fire, because of its nature, right? Its instability, its ambiguous nature. That's why it gets aligned with trickster, evil characters. I don't know. In Buddhism, the fire sermon is about how passion, hatred, and delusion burn inside of us, right? And Buddha said, liberating yourself from suffering, you can do that by detaching from these emotions, from these senses. So we have fire everywhere we look, right? Passion and desire. So what does fire represent? Passion and desire. Flickering of the flames of passion. Come on, baby, light my fire, right? We use fire is well understood to be a symbol for passion. Shakespeare liked to use fire as a symbol in his plays. One of his famous quotes in Henry VIII, "My drops of tears I'll turn to sparks of fire." Now here Queen Catherine speaks of turning sadness into actions and then declares Cardinal Wolsey her worst enemy and blames him for causing trouble between the Queen and her husband. So, back to fire. Also Romeo and Juliet, right? Act 1, Scene 1. He refers to a fire sparkling in the lover's eyes. So, that's nothing new, right? So, again, fire can be both rebirth and resurrection, life or death. Fire kind of has a broad spectrum of where it can be representative. It's not just at one end of our life or the other. Rebirth. How about the phoenix, right? The phoenix dies of combustion. Good morning, Debbie. The phoenix bursts into flames, right? Dies from being disintegrated in the flames and disintegrates into ashes and then rises from the ashes in rebirth. So, like in nature, fire, sometimes a forest fire burns. Sometimes it's not a bad thing. Sometimes a fire makes space for new growth. Kind of the thought about the phoenix, right? Something must be given up in order to create the space to create something new. That's the story of the phoenix. Eternity. Fire has always been a symbol for eternity, the metaphor of the eternal flame burning in our hearts. The flame that burns is a hope for the world. It's used in memoriams, right? In funerals. Remembering the love and sacrifice of the one who has passed. Or at Arlington, the tomb of the unknown soldier. The eternal flame eternally burns. And then, of course, right, fire has always been used to depict destruction. And remember Fahrenheit 451? Right. Fire. Is that No. Kurt Vonnegut. I think it's Kurt Vonnegut. Fahrenheit 451. Anyway, fire is the destructive force in the book. The book's about burning books, right? Literally burning knowledge to keep people in the dark. You can't know this. I don't want you to know this. We're going to burn all the knowledge. And in the book, that burning of those books is allegory. It's kind of the analogy for the destruction of mankind, the burning, our pleasure in sometimes the pleasure in destroying beauty and progress. Destruction of fire. But then, of course, fire can also play the role of hope, right? For travelers, seeing a fire burning in the distance is the sign of a destination close by. Fire has long been used in communication, right? And the Chinese used it. They would light fires along the Great Wall to send the message about what was happening with troops. Smoke signals. The Indians used smoke signals coming from fires. Fire's long been a symbol of communication and hope, warmth. How about the Statue of Liberty? Right? She holds her torch up so that the first thing that the travelers would see as they came to the New World was the fire of hope, of liberty. Hope of the New World. And finally, hell. You can't get away from the coupling of hell and fire, right? Our modern view of hell always includes fire. May you burn in hell. May you burn in the fiery pits of hell, right? Dante wrote the Inferno. Fire awaits you in hell. Torture. Actually, fire was associated with hell even before Christian beliefs became the norm, right? Even before the Bible. Plato wrote, in about 380 BC, Plato wrote about the lake of fire, which the evil spirits burned in. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, now we're talking 1250 years BC, long before Jesus ever walked the earth, they spoke of the lake of fire that awaits the sinners. Then, of course, there's the Bible. Then now we get to the Christians. The Bible. Revelation condemns people who worship the beast or the false prophets, and it says those sinners will be cast alive in the lake of fire burning with brimstone. The lake of fire. It's a new term for me, but apparently been around for a very long time. That was the image, right? The lake of fire to burn up the sinners. Matthew even spoke of the lake of fire, the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. Who knew? Who knew? Okay. And finally we have fire as purification. Back to the phoenix. The Bible speaks of fire as hell, but it also speaks of the symbolization of purification. Sodom and Gomorrah, they fall into their sinful ways. God burns them down, right? Turns it to ashes to purify the earth, get rid of the sinners. And again, the phoenix rises through the ashes, rebirth. So fire. Destructive, constructive, helped us be the people we are today, was a leading force in our going from cave dwellers, eating whatever worms were available to us, to walking upright, healthy, fitness crazies we are today with modern tech and all the modern technologies that came from fire. So long part of our history, long part of our culture, long part of the tools that made us who we are today. And so we can say our fascination with fire ends when we start to understand it. And that's the scientists' view of it, right? That once you understand fire and you can control it and manage it, it loses its fascination for us. So maybe most of us really are not at that point. Maybe most of us are still in that fascination phase. And I don't know, something about sitting around with your friends around a fire and singing campfire songs or laughing and talking, or how about most importantly, just when everything goes silent and everyone's just staring into the fire in a moment of collective silence and what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it. Collective energy, right? Where everybody's thoughts are in the fire and the fire's kind of controlling. Isn't that a good fire? And the fire's kind of controlling our thoughts. So that's the show today. Just a little fun with fire on a Wednesday, right? Trying to figure out why do we love the flame? Why do we burn the candle? Why do we spend $2 billion a year to make sure there's a flame burning around us most of the time? We love it. We love it. You love it. Leave me a note. I'd love to know. What do you think about fire? Do you love it? Do you not care about it? Was it dumb? Looking for different subjects for the show. Just, me, exploring anything I can get my hands on. So if you liked it, leave me a note. Leave me a like. Leave me an emoji. I love those little emojis. Anyway, come back tomorrow. I will be having a guest, a young lady who is on her way to becoming a nutritional expert, who is determined to change her life through diet and exercise and setting a good example for her children and those around her. And she just happens to be my daughter. So we'll be talking to Amy tomorrow morning at 7. She'll be my guest. And until then, go out there and make it a happy day.